Greetings to all American patriots. Today, you will discover the answer to the global warming question, so you're not going to want to miss this. In my video entitled, "In the Government, 1 + 1 = 3, I said that when the government tries to act on our behalf, it gets it wrong most of the time. I used examples of student loans, which have created over $1.7 trillion of outstanding debt, the Affordable Care Act, which has left 112 million Americans struggling to afford the health care that they need, and the welfare system, which has trapped 37 million Americans in poverty. Ronald Reagan was once quoted as saying, "The most terrifying words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government and I'm here to help.'" He sure got that right. So now our government wants to reduce global warming. Man, that's a scary thought. Before we look at what it is doing, I think it would be a good idea to start with a brief review of the science behind global warming and how we got here in the first place. I am a retired nuclear power plant chemist, so today you will finally hear the real story and the science behind it, and not a lot of media and political hype. Carbon dioxide, or CO2 as it is known, is a greenhouse gas that traps heat in our atmosphere, preventing it from escaping into space. For the past several 100,000 years, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere remained within a fairly limited range. It began to increase beyond that range at about the same time as the start of the industrial age. Emissions from transportation like cars, planes, and trains, along with industrial activities, were the cause. Coincidentally, the Earth's temperature started to increase at about the same time and has accelerated as carbon dioxide concentrations have risen. So even a casual observer would conclude that, number one, our planet is warming up, and number two, at least part of the reason, is carbon dioxide emissions from our activities. Over the next several decades, rising temperatures will gradually affect our climate, resulting in changes in rainfall patterns, stronger storms, and rising sea levels. If we don't do anything to counteract global warming, it will eventually cost a lot of money and create great hardships for many people. However, here's one that our politicians don't want us to know. If we take the wrong actions to counteract global warming, it will also cost a lot of money and create great hardships for many people. In fact, if the world converted to 100% net zero carbon energy within the next 10 years, all of humanity would become impoverished. So it's important to go about combating global warming in such a way as to avoid causing a lot of collateral damage. Is our government up to the task? Based on their track record, are you kidding? Not a chance. But in any case, here's what they are doing. They have discouraged oil exploration by restricting leasing of government land and permits to drill there. These actions have decreased the supply of domestic crude oil and eliminated our energy independence, making us vulnerable to foreign oil producers. They have also created a poor economic outlook for oil refineries, which has discouraged them from maintaining their own facilities, further decreasing the supplies of gasoline, diesel fuel, and jet fuel. As a result, we can expect much higher prices at the pump and at the grocery store. What's more, releasing oil from our strategic oil supply to offset these high prices improves the supply for now, only to cause greater shortages in the near future when we have to replenish the reserve. It's clear that certain politicians wanted to temporarily lower the prices to trick us into voting for them. They have also provided incentives to buy electric vehicles, or EVs as they are known. EVs are said to be zero-emission vehicles, and yet they are anything but. Sure, there are no emissions when you drive them, but where do you think the electricity comes from that's used to charge their batteries? It comes primarily from coal and natural gas-fired power plants, which produce a lot of CO2. Not only that, but it takes a significant amount of fossil fuels just to manufacture an EV. Producing an EV and its battery creates 10 to 20 tons of carbon dioxide emissions. Eventually, EVs do catch up and produce less overall greenhouse gases than vehicles with internal combustion engines, but only after a lot of driving. In a Volkswagen study, they found that it can take as much as 60,000 miles of driving before an EV will have emitted less carbon dioxide than a conventional vehicle. Now you're starting to get the picture that we are consuming a lot of fossil fuels in order to go green. Add to that, EVs typically have a sticker price that is $10,000 to $20,000 higher than their gasoline-powered counterparts. Is it worth it? Our government has also provided incentives to install solar panels in homes. They cost anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000. To store that power, a battery may be needed, which would add another $10,000 to $20,000 to the price tag. Considering that an average American family spends about $1,450 on electricity per year, it would take a mighty long time to recover those costs, even with incentives. Going green sure costs a lot of green. Then there are incentives to establish solar and wind farms. The problem with these is that they will never supply the bulk of our electricity because the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. We need a reliable source of electricity that will serve as our baseload. The choices are coal, natural gas, and nuclear, with nuclear as the only emissions-free option. Is the government promoting nuclear power? Absolutely not, because they want us to fear it. More about that later. In reality, more people have died falling off of roofs installing solar panels than in the entire history of the nuclear power industry in the U.S. France is supplying 70% of their needs with nuclear power and with an impeccable safety record. Ultimately, the correct answer to the climate change question is EVs and hybrids, along with nuclear power. With nuclear power, EVs and hybrids could be manufactured and their batteries charged using this clean energy, with wind and solar having a lesser role. As for the supply of domestic oil, it should be fully maintained as we transition to clean energy so as to prevent price spikes. These changes that I've just mentioned work, All of them are cost effective, and they avoid any undesirable consequences. Contrast that with our government's plan to go green, which includes giving subsidies to the wealthy to buy expensive EVs and solar panels for their homes, and to investors in wind and solar farms. So for the wealthy, the green stands for money in their pockets. Their Going Green plan has also significantly increased the cost of food and energy, harming those that can least afford it, the poor. So in effect, the government's plan to combat climate change robs from the poor and gives to the rich. The government has caused more harm than good, as usual. It appears that those dimwits couldn't find their way out of a paper bag. Truly, I say, we need to throw the bums out of Washington and replace them with public servants who know what they're doing. What's even more disconcerting is that there is a political party in America that wants to strike fear in our hearts when it comes to climate change. They want us to believe that it is an existential threat, a threat to the very existence of mankind. As a scientist, I can assure you that this is a complete exaggeration. They and their media cohorts use this distortion because they want us to become dependent on them for our safety. They know that fear leads to dependence, and dependence leads to more power and control over us. This is just one example that demonstrates clearly why political parties are toxic to our nation. John Adams described them as the greatest political evil under our Constitution. We must not be coerced into handing control of our nation over to a political party. The power of our government must always remain where it rightfully belongs, in the hands of the people.